Hi, I'm Roland, Mr. Roland. Usually at the beginning or during camp training, if I'm working with the intervention room and I'm working with staff, is I introduce myself and I tell some things about myself. I didn't do all of that this time because, as we have heard, it's not camp, it's training. But I say things like, this is what I look like. I'm not angry at you. I don't feel well. I don't feel well pretty much all of the time. I was describing this situation last night to Kevin and some others around the boat dock, and Miss Michelle said something hilarious once again, which was, "Oh, really? I just thought you were grumpy and didn't like anyone except Mr. Kevin." But there are misunderstandings because I am fairly this way, and you've noticed most of the week I wear shirts which are kind of disarming. So if I'm wearing a Mickey Mouse shirt, it helps with first impressions. I've drawn this temperature meter here, and I am aware that we don't want to mix metaphors. Nancy talks about shifting in the brain. It's hard to draw a diagram of that to see which part of the brain they're in, how far they're in that part of the brain. So this is just a little temperature thing here, and I would kind of describe it. They're working with their parents when they're in the normal range. They're working with us anything up here. But often we get kids somewhere in the middle. They're in the, I have it labeled hot. What we do with them can make them escalate or de-escalate. And that's a lot of what we're talking about. We don't want to push them any further. We've talked a lot about what the parents feel like. We haven't talked much about what the kids feel like. It says, when I'm at my worst, I need someone at their best. If you're not ready to be your best, you should not be working with the red bandanas. And my wife and I are church counselors. We work with marriage and family, particularly with addiction and pain and trauma and things like that. And we talk a lot about, are you your best self? Schedule a conversation with your loved ones when you're your best self, because they need you. If my body is broken and I go to the doctor, I really want a doctor who doesn't have a broken body. When my emotions are out of control, I hope I go to a therapist who has their emotions under control. So that's a really big deal in the intervention room. All right, this word says caricature. What does that mean? It's a cartoon of a person. So it is a drawing of a person that over accentuates certain things. Camp is not real life. We overemphasize certain things. A caricature of that Kevin would have his beard down to his feet. We're going to take one aspect and we're going to accentuate it. And I won't make any other bodily description caricatures. But what do we caricature at camp? What do we overemphasize? Well, compared to reality, what do we overemphasize? Thank you. We overemphasize respect with the understanding, and this often isn't said. We take respect off the charts, expecting that in real life they'll fall back to normal somewhere. We overemphasize it. In real life, there isn't, well, I will pretend I'm talking to my child, Judy, she doesn't talk, but Judy, yes, Dad, I would like you to do this. Yes, Dad. We don't always have all of those things in everyday speech, and you don't have to get a job. But how do you learn something different than what you've been doing is you have to go way past middle. If you are in debt, you don't get out of debt by balancing the budget. These kids cannot correct their mistakes without going well past normal. And this is something we emphasize at camp. It's a caricature. All right. Intervention. What does that word mean?
To interrupt for progress.
What are we interrupting?
An established pattern.
Yeah, or maybe it's real life. We're interrupting real life. The camp is a caricature, which means we can emphasize things that they can't do at home. At home, they have their 9-to-5 jobs. At camp, they don't have jobs. You cannot do camp the rest of your life. A lot of these parents are confused because they try to do camp at home, but you can't do camp, well, anyway, it's complicated. Intervention is an interruption in life. We work with families and we say things like, this would be a lot easier if you didn't have to go to work tomorrow, wouldn't it? But unfortunately, we can't cancel that. This would be a lot easier if your kids were gone for a month and just the husband and wife could work together. Well, what's that called? It's a marriage retreat, which again is a caricature. We're overemphasizing certain things. Camp is not real life. You go to a different place than your home so you can imagine things differently. It's very hard to imagine yourself different at home in your bed. It's easier to imagine yourself different in a place, especially if there's other people also imagining things different. And by different, I mean better. Things like the newspaper fashion show don't work at home. Your kids fight, all that kind of stuff. It works in a caricature, an environment where we overemphasize things because the kids look around and see, well, look, that family's having fun. And the mom and dad look over there and say, oh, look, they're having fun. Even though they wouldn't have been able to do it, at least the first time, they wouldn't have been able to do it at home in their living room, inside their house where they have all their history and they'll have all of their bad memories, all that kind of stuff. So at camp, we can imagine ourselves different. Intervention is a break in the normal things. We stop whatever cycle is happening so that we can hopefully introduce a new one. We had potty training for a long time at our house. And there's this one potty video that we watched, and it's this little kid, and he's at the birthday party, and they have the clown, and all the kids are playing, and there was a certain song that happened in the movie which said he had to go to the bathroom. And he was torn because the party was here and the bathroom was there. And it was so subtle in the movie, or the video, that, well, I noticed it and I pointed it out. But when the kid decided to go to the bathroom, he turned and they all froze. They were teaching the kids, it's okay to go to the bathroom at the party. It's okay to leave. You won't miss anything. It's hilarious. Traction, like where you break your leg and you have to learn how to walk again. What does, the example I want you to think of is like a Marine or something. Has spinal damage and has to learn to walk again. And often it's a little physical therapist about this big that's making this giant man cry. She asks him to do exactly what his body doesn't want to do. We are asking the children to do the thing they fear the most. We think, go tell your mom what happened. We think that is, should cost the child about that much. And they throw a fit for 2 hours from the floor to here. This is how much energy they expended. And we don't understand because they look different. They're not different to the child. The child made the right decision from the child's point of view. This hurts more than this. Looking their parent in the eye is the thing they want to do the worst. We all know what that's like. You're, in a situation, and it's like, tell me the thing that you don't want to tell me. That's what we're asking them to do. It's terrifying. So we spent a lot of time talking about what the parents are going through. That's what the kids are going through. All therapy is like that, by the way. We're asking you to do the thing you don't want to do. Why? Why don't you want to do it? It hurts. Why are you in a bad situation? Physically, emotionally, socially, you're in a bad situation because you've been doing a certain thing for a long time. My first our first child, after Rosie was born, the nurse was kneading my wife's abdomen. You birth mothers know what that's about. And my wife said to the nurse, "That hurts." Which means,
Stop doing it.
right, we think if it hurts, we should stop doing it. Very innate. And the nurse said, "I know, honey." We think if it hurts, we should stop doing it. And yet we're asking the children to do the exact opposite of that. I'm asking you to do the thing you fear the most. So this leads to compassion. A lot of what motivates us is we really do have compassion for these kids. Be like me. So we're talking about in the intervention room. We're talking about what works and doesn't work. And I asked Nancy, I think I've done 10 plus camps. I've known Nancy for 15 years. And I'd ask, why am I effective? And she would say things like, well, because you love the kids, but I didn't understand that because it's just what I do. It's others of us have said that we do the things at camp that we're good at. Well, often the things that you're good at, you never learned. They're just the way you are. Someone said, a mom knows how to trust, but can't teach the child how to trust. It's because she never learned it. She just developed it naturally. It's very hard to teach things that you didn't learn yourself. This is just a number line. If this is real, at camp, the dining hall working, families working together is a little bit away from real life. The intervention room is way over here. It's the farthest thing from reality that we do at camp. It's the least normal thing, the least natural thing. So it is the most, it's gone. It's the most caricatured. It's the most off. I am effective in the intervention room. Why? Well, there's a lot of things that I didn't choose to do. I didn't choose to be this size. Why are most security guards, bouncers, big men? Simply by my size, I prevent certain issues in the intervention room. If you're working with a child, they will pick out a staff that they think they can dominate. That's not something we want to happen. You want to see a kid go from, mildly to maniacal? Let them dominate an adult. So what is it about me? Why am I good at this job? I'm independent. It has this independent means I'm fine to go my direction even though the rest of you aren't. Now that can be good and bad, but if there's 5 kids trying to pull the room this way, I don't care. I'm stubborn. I go at my own pace. I talk slower than most of you. I'm consistent. Consistency. We talked about how our kids are traumatized by inconsistency, inconsistent parenting. I'm pretty consistent, especially when I'm trying to be professional. So my wife and I sung through high school and college. And I was in a choir in Southern California, 55 voice male chorale, 8 parts, all guys. And the director would say something like, this group, second tenor, sound like him. The director didn't say, Kevin, describe how you sing that to the people around you, because he couldn't describe it because he's doing it naturally. But the rest of us could say, wait a minute, I'm doing it differently than him. So there are a lot of things that we don't quite know how to articulate, and that's why I was pointing out about Miss Nancy. A lot of problems that happen are people who watch videos or come to camp, they write down the phrase that Nancy uses, but they use it differently because they're not doing it like her, because the motivation is different. So it's hard to teach things that you didn't learn. I didn't learn to be this tall. I didn't. All right. Large, commanding people prevent incidences. It's like the decision is made, there's no point fighting. There's no point in fighting with this person. It's preventative. However, that doesn't work on this certain age of kids, probably from here down, like 9 and lower. They don't care how big you are, because everyone at camp is bigger than them. That part of the brain doesn't work. I don't want to use the word intimidation, but the prevention part really works on the kids who have the abstract thinking starting to kick in. Because then they're like, well, I could get away with this person, but not this person. The little ones, they go ballistic no matter who it is. And the parents think that those kids usually should wear cowboy boots. That's usually what happens, is they come to camp with boots on. This no point in fighting is really huge. We have not talked about restraint, or I call physical intervention, but there are some things that can happen. One is we played the game with Paul. Well, one has to do with chasing. If you want to see them go from I'm in the intervention room to I'm maniacal, let's not turn on the predator-prey part of their brain. We were playing tag the other day, the blob tag with Paul. And who got the most emotional rush? Was it the people who were it? No, I'll say that differently. When you got an emotional rush during that game, when it when you were it, or when you were running? What do you think?
When you were it, you're like, yeah.
So it might be different, but by the looks on their faces, let's say you two are it and you're coming at me and I narrowly escape, that elation, that rush, that's huge. And if by the looks, if we videoed everyone's faces, the emotions were heightened when you almost get caught but you get away. Sometimes we have to chase kids. If the maniacal kids are the kids that engage in that, you can't catch me. We mustn't do that. Go back to my number line here, or my whatever that's called. You have to know when you're going to intervene. So way over here is the child banging the floor. Somewhere in the middle is the child banging the wall. Eventually they're banging the window. When are you going to intervene? You have to know that before the child starts what they're doing. Because they will escalate it until you have to act. So you have to know when you're going to act. Because if I know when I'm going to act, I'm not reactive. I'm like, oh, cross the line. And I go and I deal with it. Because what they'll do is they'll keep escalating until they force you to get out of your chair. So we have to know beforehand what is safe, what is not safe. And a lot of that has to do with having someone experienced who has been through camp. A lot of the discussions about what do you do with a child that does this, those questions are from people who haven't seen day 7 of camp. The parents haven't seen day 7 of camp. So we bring the confidence that it's okay that this is happening on day 2. It's okay. Because I know what happens at the end. So many times in Paul's, what are they called? Parent interactions?
Experience, yeah.
Parent experience?
Encounters.
Parent encounters? A lot of things come out which are, I didn't know when this was going to end. Who is the only one out there that knew when it was going to end? It's Paul. If you need confidence, you look to the person who knows how this ends, right? So a lot of the concern at camp are people who don't know how it's going to end. They don't know what happens later in camp. They don't know that that child who's flipping and flopping and screaming actually turns into compliant. If you've never seen it, you don't have that confidence. All right, I'm big and strong-ish. Oh, predator prey. If they are convinced that I'm bigger and stronger and faster than them, they won't run. So we need people who at least give the illusion that I'm faster than them. And then I don't chase them unless I absolutely have to. If they're just running around in a circle, two different kinds of runners. There are kids who just need to exercise their legs. They don't run away from you. They just run. Let them run. And then there's others who make a beeline and try to get as far away from you as possible. And then there's kids who run straight for danger. They'll pick the most dangerous thing at camp and run toward it. I chase them. All right. Tug of war is another one. Pull on me a little bit, and I pull back. You're restraining, and they are physically pulling you back and forth. It's stimulating the part of the brain which says, I could win this. If I don't let him pull at all, he gives up really quickly, no point. It's like tying a dog to an elastic cord. They're going to pull on that thing, tie him to a chain. They're like, argh. If you're so much bigger and stronger, that they'll give up the resistance really quickly because they're not getting that feedback. And unfortunately, we're limited in what we can and can't do. But if there was someone twice as big as me, well, we talked about them, lifting people off the ground. Oh, that's a huge adrenaline rush when they can do that. So we don't want to engage this tug of war thing, this predator-prey chase. My voice. I didn't decide to have this voice. Nancy was describing a female voice stimulates a different part of the brain than the male voice. My wife has a very high voice. One of the things that she would do in my ear is the sound a mosquito makes. Very high voice. And she would do that high-pitched thing that Nancy did that I can't even utter. She would make that noise to our little kids when they're toddler-ish and just kiss them on the neck. And it's like charging up their battery, and they'd get to a point where it's like the pressure valve goes off and they start squealing and then run around the room like this. The same thing works with dogs, by the way. Get right in their face and make those sounds. They get so... I don't really want to fill up these kids with any more emotions. And the high-pitched voice does that. Now, another thing that happens is we've talked a lot about is how do you act under stress? Alicia, Alicia talks fast. Yesterday she was talking, and she talked at this rate. I'm like, wow, that's half pace. You really slowed down. If a child can make you talk faster, can make you talk higher, can make your face change. Sarah was described as very expressive eyes. That can be very scary to our kids. Because when you come to talk to them, they don't know who they're going to get. They have enough trouble reading facial expressions already. So if we could only have one facial expression, that's my next point. I am stoic. I don't like that, but I am. And particularly autism, they like not having much going on in your face. They can focus on your words when there's not a lot going on here. So just try to be very calm and static. Again, intervention room, I don't know what, your flight check zone? Is that what you're calling it? So this is reality. This is not real life. Parents always ask me, should I be like you? No! This is the most extreme thing we do at camp. The least nurturing thing. The farthest from reality. Tone of voice, men versus women. Cadence, yeah, we talked about that. Stoic, and then I'm going to write my first thing over here. Emotional. And Nancy said yesterday, be very careful that you don't tell people what not to do, because someone's going to watch the video or take down a note and say, Mr. Roland said I should be emotional. So I'm going to double up. It's not so much that you don't have emotions, it's that you don't have a large range. Because then they can figure out whether they're winning. If they can make you emote. When you see the child clearly in distress, it hurts because we are normal, empathetic humans. Their pain causes me pain. Now, when you're in pain, how do you act? Most of us try to fix it, try to make it stop. Most of these problems that happen at camp happen with regard to the Reds or a parent who's completely melted down, because that's the most traumatic thing that happens at camp. Someone asked, why do we have all of these staff issues at this camp? Well, it's a traumatic experience. When you see someone in pain, we want to fix them. Now, if you're coming to camp with a bunch of emotional needs, maybe you need to be proved right for what you've been doing at home for the last 10 years. Maybe you need proved right because you're a therapist and you've been doing it a certain way. Therapists have been the most difficult staff members because they won't change what they're doing, because they're vested in how many years and how many dollars, which means they need to be validated from what they already believe. We have people who come to camp, get corrected in the good way, come to the next camp and do the same thing over again. They're coming to camp because they're needy. Any questions there? It's enormous. This is why people will not take correction, because it means I've been doing it wrong this whole time, and they get very defensive. So how correctable are you? It's a huge factor at camp. When you go to the doctor and you say, look at my arm, what's the worst thing they can say? What do you think? Probably. Less severe than that.
I don't see what's wrong with it.
So that one is invalidating. I don't see a problem, but there's something a little worse than that. How about, never seen that before?
Oh.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
That's bad. And so we need to act like, even if we haven't seen the behavior before, act like, yeah, old hat. And that's why experienced staff are like, it's no problem. I've seen that before. Not only have I seen that, I see what happens 3 days later. Remember well, not to get too religious, but he endured the cross for the joy set before him. He saw what was on the other side. We have to see what's on the other side. And is what's on the other side. If we see that, we can endure a lot. All right. How else do they speak? How does a firefighter speak to you, or a policeman? Again, do they talk like direct? They give directive statements in CPR training, right? Like, we're not trained to ask a lot of questions. We're asked to give short, clear directions. Same thing. Why? Because when you're in a panic, I do not want to know what the firefighter is thinking. I want them to tell me what to do. And often, at camp, we say too much. I do a lot of staff correction at camp. Now, not in the bad way. I do management. One of the things that I say is, low and slow. I'll come up beside a staff who is clearly talking in a higher pitched voice because they feel more intimidated, and they're talking fast because they're nervous. And I say low and slow. They know what it means. And again, this is back to the training that we do before camp. Is I tell them, if I see an unsafe situation that you do not see, I will come and take over. And I'll say it something like, I'll take over here. We've done a role play before where the doctors and nurses acted like moms and said all the things. Oh, I can't believe this is happening, and on and on and on. It's hilarious because it's so disconcerting. I'm going to put threats over here. We haven't used that word before. It's on that side, and I will put a red circle around it and cross it out. Threats are, if you do that, such and such is going to happen. And usually, the threats are something that we would never enforce. We can't do that. We say clear consequences like, you know what, if you jump out that window, you're not going to get to be by the window, or something very enforceable and realistic. No threats. Another thing that is me is I'm hypervigilant. Yesterday I went and sat in the back of the room just to feel how much different it feels to me. I had early childhood trauma, not rad, but I certainly am in pain, and I'm certainly avoiding painful situations, and I love people, so I'm avoiding painful situations for us. If I can see all of you, I'm much more calm. Now, there are people, so when I want the intervention room to be calm and quiet and orderly, because it's better for everybody. There are people who come to camp who want the intervention room to be calm and quiet and orderly because they like people to follow their directions. We talked about rad parents. There are rad staff, and I'm not using that term technically as diagnosed. I'm using it as their motivation are not normal. Normal people get endorphins from social things and exciting things and all that kind of stuff. There are people who get pleasure from controlling others. And yes, we have them come to camp. So why do I want things to run smoothly? Because I love the kids. But you can have the same environment, but different motivations. This weeds out that last group, by the way. So I said calm, confident, unafraid. This is the difference. If I'm in the middle of something, and you can correct me, it might take me a while to shift directions, but I will accept correction. All right, last on this list is humor. And I only use the top half of a whiteboard because this is so humor. It is very important to realize that the way I talk amongst staff when nobody else is around is completely different than how I talk to parents, right? How do nurses and doctors and firemen and policemen have a wicked sense of humor, or they don't survive? But you cannot say that stuff around patients. Right? Do we realize they're two completely different ways of talking? I am the funniest person I know. I'll describe it. My wife and I have known each other for 30 years. We've been married 26 in May. And the other night, I said something hilarious. We're laying there in the dark. I said something hilarious. And I listened. And then I said, I've never heard you laugh so quietly before. And then she did laugh, and then she hit me because for 30 years she's been trying not to laugh. So if humor's over there, What's over here on the don't? I said it earlier today. Oh my word. Can't do it. Our kids are very literal. All of us, as I describe it, we devolve when we're stressed. However old I am, whatever I just learned in the last year under stress, I forget that stuff and I move back to a previous level. You might move back so far, you lose abstract reasoning. Yeah, it happens. Like when you're sobbing, sarcasm doesn't work well. It's confusing. It's like giving, anyway, our son, I don't know how big he was, 3, 4, and my wife was describing to someone that, kids are so black and white. And he literally did this. No, I'm not, Mom. Right? So literal. He looked at his skin to see if he was black or white. We cannot. So again, long before we had kids, my wife and I decided we're not going to be sarcastic. It's lying. And I wouldn't play card games where you had to lie because I don't need to exercise that. That was long before we even had kids. All right. The scariest image is like a clown, right? It's a maniacal smile. Now, if all you have is a smile and an unattached child, they do not understand the emotions behind the smile. The only thing they can interpret it as is the maniacal clown. We use walkie-talkies sometimes, and we have to train staff to have telegraphic speech. Telegraphic speech means you used to pay for every single letter that you sent over the telegraph, so you would save money by cutting it down as much as you can, especially with our really mentally challenged kids. Don't put any frivolous words in there. If a child can't, we've worked with kids that can't handle, look me in the eyes. I simply say, eyes, look me in the eyes. 5 words. We've talked about our kids focus on the wrong word. Let's say the kid only can hear 2 of 5 words. I better make sure the 2 I use are the right ones. So sometimes we have to really, telegraphic speech, sometimes we really need to shorten it down. Like my child is like that. She couldn't do 2 words for quite a while. So I better make sure I only say the one I want her to hear.